Hi everyone, and thank you to Nathan Heller for letting me make this anatomy feedback video. Diving right in, let's fix the shoulder, and specifically because the arm is folded and rotated that way, the bicep would be bulged and the deltoid or shoulder muscle would be behind the bicep. As you can see in these reference photos, the deltoid actually connects on the side of the arm in between the biceps and the triceps. Pay attention to how deeply the armpit goes under the pectoralis and in front of the latissimus dorsi muscles of the back. So in this case, you have to make sure that line delineating the underside of the arm goes much deeper into the torso and overlaps the outline of the back muscles. Be careful, don't be fooled by certain specific bodybuilder poses when they're trying to show off very specific anatomy. They often do the opposite of what is a good pose for a superhero, where they kind of sink in their chest. What you want to do most of the time for a strong male superhero is shoulders back and chest out. So make sure you give the chest that depth. You could see in these two reference images here that are before and after how much more strong and heroic the after image seems because of how much the chest actually protrudes from the central line of the body. So right now this crotch area is too ambiguous like the armpit was. You would see dimension there as the crotch overlaps the thigh muscles, and no matter how tight the spandex is, there would be some degree of creasing or stretching or wrinkles there in that area radiating outward toward the thigh. So you have the thigh rotated that way and the lower leg rotated in the opposite direction. Also, the leg is being drawn too stiff and straight. There's also a big perspective issue with the feet. Look how the foot on the left of the illustration seems to be pointing downward as though it would be going through the floor, and then the other foot is very straight as though it's on a flat tabletop. You can't have the perspective one way for one foot and one way for the other. So you could see here I'm starting to draw over the legs and simultaneously try to unstiffen the leg on the left and make the perspective on the feet match each other better. When you're working on any illustration, it's always a good idea to occasionally horizontally flip the image. It'll really help you see what mistakes you're making and issues with proportions and perspective a lot more clearly. The shoulder and neck area had the most ambiguity. I couldn't tell. It looks like there was the start of a cape up there, but the rest of the cape wasn't drawn. So I'm just going to draw in the actual neck muscles and trapezius muscles and then start working on this other arm, which looks a little bit too long to me. So I'm actually going to start cutting and moving and nudging around the anatomy a little bit to fix that issue. I also noticed this fist was a little small, so I correct the size of that, and then I'm just going to start inking over it to get some more clarity of what's going on, and of course using the horizontal flipping trick to make sure that I'm actually fixing the proportions enough. And now finally moving on to inking the head, I realized that the face did not protrude enough from the kind of centered base of the neck, so I'm going to fix that shortly by grabbing the face and moving it outward a bit. So now the skull actually moves forward from the base of the neck enough. And finally, for this last part of this forearm and fist, they're pretty strong, so I mostly just ink over them quickly, but the fingers are a little bit too long there at the top, and it's always good to delineate knuckles and the wrist more. But the one funny thing about drawing hands on angles like this is you actually cannot see the thumb, and hands always look a little funny. But if you add a thumb in this kind of pose, it looks like the character is hitchhiking. And now that all of the major corrections that I saw needed to be done are done, I'm just going to start adding some basic shading and then also move on to cleaning things up. And then I'm going to start using the horizontal flipping trick again. Now more than ever, it's really important to do that a lot and just look for the more subtle things that are still not quite perfect. So you can see I continue to shorten this arm a bit more. And I continue to make other small adjustments. There's one last big adjustment I make, and that is to move the entire head and neck area back toward the back of the spine. Keep in mind the spine is at the back of a person, not the front, so the neck actually comes from the back of the chest, if that makes sense, and protrudes forward. And you may notice a second or two ago I rotated the entire illustration just to make it feel like he's more upright standing on a floor. And that's about it for this one. The most important point I can make here is even when you're training to try to draw figures from your head, from memory, always reference before you consider them finished. Take a look at them, remember where you had problems, where you weren't sure what exactly to do, and reference bodybuilder images and anatomical references. Make your corrections and dedicate these fixes to memory. I hope this was helpful. If it was, please consider liking and subscribing. Thanks for watching.